I have a request to those of you who are morally affronted by the riot in Dublin on Thursday. The journalists, news reporters, Z-list media so-called personalities, NGOs, politicians, open border fans and so on. If you have spent the last few days speaking of your outrage about Thursday night and not the shocking and petrifying events of Thursday afternoon, then I would ask you to do the following. Go and find a 1 litre bottle of water. Make sure it's full. Open it. Pour it out. How long did it take to empty? Not long, I bet. Probably as long as it takes for a knifed 5-year-old to bleed out. 1 litre is just slightly less than the blood volume in a 5-year-old girl's body, an amount based on a weight prediction of around 15 to 18 kg, and the fact that children have 70 to 75 millilitres of blood per kg. This little girl's small body would have had between 1,050 and 1,260 millilitres total when she had her throat slit halal style by the Algerian who targeted her. Yesterday, Saturday the 25th of November, most published news updates on the child's condition referred to how she was doing the previous day. In other words, there was almost no official news updates on her condition pertaining to Saturday itself, except for one in the Mirror at 6 p.m. yesterday. They claim she is still in a critical condition. The young victim wasn't referred to at all when I listened to the radio news bulletins. It is almost as though she never existed. As of the time of recording, at 3:07 a.m. on Sunday the 26th of November, there have been no further updates. I am somewhat worried when I see barriers being erected around several government buildings yesterday afternoon. What are they expecting? They certainly know righteous public anger will be tenfold what it was the other night if that little girl dies. I hope it is just a precautionary measure and not a sign of anything more. Please God she is still fighting, but if she is, it is nothing short of a miracle. As already stated, her throat was slashed. This was reported by The Independent. Those who intervened say she was stabbed multiple times. Witnesses have conveyed her little tiny body was lifeless, and there was a huge amount of blood loss. In the picture showing her discarded Paw Patrol bag beside the paramedics tending to her, there's an AED machine which is used in the event of a cardiac arrest. The brave carer who some are alleging was an SNA may have received very similar wounds, and she, an adult with 5 times the blood volume, was described as being in a very serious condition, despite that she may not have lost as much blood comparatively. So as I said, if this little girl is still alive, it's a miracle. And while I hope and pray she is, I wouldn't put it past the establishment to delay disclosing if she wasn't. It is quite possible, of course, that the AED machine was there as a precautionary measure. However, when a human being suffers a huge amount of blood loss, cardiac arrest can result. Another possible complication of massive loss of oxygenated blood is brain damage. Also ending up on a life support machine with no chance of ever waking up is a potential outcome. There is alive and then there is technically alive. Additionally, a massive blood transfusion carries risks. Cardiac arrest can occur as well as other potentially serious, even fatal complications, and life expectancy can be negatively affected post-transfusion. In one study, 24% of patients died within the first year after transfusion, 30% within 2 years, and 52% within 10 years. Survival rates depend on various factors. Blood transfusion has been linked to immunosuppression, malignancy, and organ dysfunction, amongst other things. If she survives, will she function normally in a physical sense? And how will she deal with the extensive trauma? How will the others deal with the extensive trauma and all the loved ones involved, the witnesses, those who intervened, and the other children at the school, as well as school staff and the local community? You see, she is a delicate, vulnerable human, not a bus, not a Lewis, not a shop window or a looted store. She is a daughter, someone's little girl, someone's child, someone's baby, someone worthy of your focus, just like the other victims are too. A child is a gift of love, and someone filled with extreme hate tried to take that away in the cruelest of ways. Yet the establishment and people like you have the nerve to call people like me the hate-filled far right. We stand for protecting all children, and if all children are love itself, then we by extension stand for love. People like you and the establishment itself protect killers and invite all sorts of anonymous grifters and drifters, some of whom are a threat. You put all children at risk, including migrant ones, and you have blood on your hands, not us. So does this put things in better perspective for you? Have you got your priorities straight now? I doubt that, and I also doubt you care about the undeniable fact that peace of mind is forever destroyed for most people in this country. As for all of us, it feels too close to home. Yet you are deliberately deflecting from the real concerns and issues at hand by harping on about a riot. No matter what people's opinions are on whether the rioting was right or wrong, it was always going to happen as a consequence of such a horrific crime. The fact remains that the only thing anyone should be talking about is how and why young children and their carer could have been stabbed outside their school. The riot would never have taken place if this had not occurred. Do not forget this. Are you stupid and selfish enough to label what they did as an overreaction, when all the while you are overreacting tremendously to their riot? Then we have the faux moral indignation from Varadkar, Harris, McEntee and co., while the media gaslights supreme. Legislation is being fast-tracked, tools to control and silence. They couldn't have planned it better if they tried. Varadkar says our women and children are scared of the rioters. Harris says there were lunatics on the street. The language being used regarding the rioters has been hyperbolic in the extreme, but the fact remains there is no serious evidence that they were out to kill anyone, least of all innocent children. We are not afraid of anyone other than the kind of lunatics who may copy this man. For me, even before now, I have been deeply worried. When I was asked, a few days prior to Thursday's attack, if my young daughter could go on a panto trip to the Gaiety near Christmas, I immediately decided in my head that this was not something I was comfortable with, lest a terror attack may happen. I knew something bad was coming, and I, along with others, were proven right last week. The attacker is not being referred to by birthplace and real nationality, despite the media having had no special instruction from Gardaí not to report where he originated from. All they can say is he was here 20 years and was an Irish citizen. And all this proves is he never integrated. He was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and there will be others like him who will probably try to outdo what he did. He came to the attention of the Gardaí many times, including for carrying a knife. Gardaí say he had a grievance that was nothing to do with the school, and yet he targeted the school children anyway. The Independent has reported there are credible death threats against the man, who they say is trying to recover from his injuries. The injuries he wouldn't have if he wasn't attacking tiny, defenceless, beautiful children. The implication is that this is a disgraceful and cruel injustice to him. It is as though the people who made the threats are more repugnant than this wannabe child killer. Are we really expected to care one iota about what happens to him? Typically, mental health issues have been mentioned, but there's no mention of the glaringly obvious truth that no Irish person with mental health issues has ever randomly tried to kill multiple small children in the street. No Irish person at all, in fact, has ever carried out a random attack on children like this. Just like no Irish person has ever beheaded a gay man. And tell me please why there has been so many similar stabbings of children throughout the EU, all carried out by so-called vulnerable people with mental health issues that all have the same religious background. But let's ignore that, as once again it's time to vilify Irish men, despite that it was an Irish man who disarmed the attacker. A heroic young Frenchman also stepped in, as did a Deliveroo driver, and while I highly commend the Brazilian hero, the fact his face is splashed all over the front of the newspapers is an orchestrated attempt to construct a narrative that mass immigration only brings heroes to our shores. He is giving interviews while the Irish hero and his family have been instructed by Gardaí not to comment any further on the events of Thursday afternoon, and the man, Warren Donoghue, has not been regaled by any of those I address here. News coverage regarding the children has been very scant from the outset, and anyone would swear the city has been razed to the ground, as they talk of the darkest day in our city's history. Infuriatingly, they are not referring to the unprecedented violence against innocent precious little souls or their carer. Migrant looters have been let off the hook, and there is of course no hint of coverage regarding Gardaí being seen antagonising people and smashing windows of shops. During the sniffle season, they employed similar tactics when the state wanted to keep people from socialising in the city centre. Videos circulated of guards strategically placing bottles of beer on windowsills and emptying bags of beer cans everywhere. There has been no talk of the potential of state provocateurs being involved in the arson attacks of Thursday night, even though there probably was at least some. Lastly, but not least, on the radio the idea was mooted to test the runners of looters for DNA after old ones were left behind in a Foot Locker store. If only they would use similar testing to trace the identity of those coming in, but that wouldn't suit the agenda. There is not a trace of empathy for the public who are worried and sickened at what happened to these children, and least of all for those who live in the vicinity. If you are against migrants stabbing little ones, then you're just far right. I'm surprised the victims themselves have not been called far right at this point. Such is the surreal absurdity and manipulation of reality. As for those appearing in court, C-list Irish media celeb and attention seeker Sinead Ryan has bemoaned their entitlement to legal aid. She never objected to Joseph Puska getting it though, but what do you expect from someone who publicly salivated over people being excluded from society because they didn't have the vax pass? Many of these people were the migrants she claims to champion. Meanwhile, radio shock jock Jeremy Dixon is beside himself with excitement. The riots have offered him the type of titillation he loves, that is, the chance to pummel Irish people yet again. And Twitter is happy to boost the posts of any radical leftist that condemns Thursday night's events. The same tweeters previously openly supported extremely violent American BLM riots that resulted in mass looting and murders, and more recently they tacitly supported Hamas's barbaric slaughter spree by not condemning it amid their support for the Palestinian people. I've not seen one of them say they're upset about what happened to the little children in Parnell Square on Thursday. But as one person said to me, if the children were from Dalkey, a week of candle-lit vigils would ensue. Meanwhile, Twitter has been called upon by the Irish media regulator to curb what is shared on its platform in light of the events of the past few days. The same platform has been spamming specific Irish inquiry posts with porn links for weeks, usually posts regarding mass immigration crime. They have been relentlessly targeting posts that are about Aisling Murphy and those about Thursday's victims in order to ensure the posts are downgraded and seen less. Despite blocking these links, the same accounts come back. But if you are one of those people I referred to at the beginning of this piece, you will be in support of all these dirty tactics and care little, if at all, about the little girl or her family, nor care about the other victims and their families. I honestly don't understand how you can sit upon your moral high ground with a straight face. As for Varadkar and his type, and also the likes of Mary Lou MacDonald, who had the brass neck to express that nobody could see this attack coming, they need to understand now that the playing field has changed. Everything shifted irrevocably on Thursday afternoon, and they are to blame. Earlier on, I spoke about blood in the body of a human child. What is also in a human child is a soul. A pure and innocent little soul. It is said that it weighs 21.3 grams, as this is purported to be the amount that leaves everybody at the point of death. But I would argue it is not every human body, as some, we have learned, are soulless entities, like the politicians named here and those like them. Their words and actions over the past few days have proved this beyond all reasonable doubt. And if you support them, then you run the risk of losing your very humanity. And if you have listened to this and are still not thinking of that little girl and the other victims, then I'm afraid you have lost it already.